First-person shooters have to be one of the genres most transformed by VR. Physically handling your gun for aiming and reloading speeds limited only by your own is a great experience. Yet, being that we're stuck using tiny little controllers that aren't connected, aiming with two hands can be a little bit shaky, and there's not that sense of kick and feedback when you shoot. Well, those two problems is what this not-so-little thing I have is aiming to correct. This is the Enforcer Revolt Haptic Gunstock by DeadEyeVR, and it's what we'll be reviewing today. Because oh boy, this thing's fun and got a lot to talk about. Now, two important disclaimers though. Firstly, I was sent this product for free for review purposes, but I had no restrictions or limitations on what I could or could not say, so I'm just going to tell you what I think of it. And if I wouldn't buy it myself, then I'm not going to recommend it. But secondly, this technically is advertised with just MetaQuest support. However, the Crystal controllers have a very similar shape to the Quest line. So I reached out to them to see if this would work with the Crystal controllers because, well, finding a good gun stock for those has been kind of annoying. And this does work quite well, but there are a few extra steps to keep in mind. So I'm going to be reviewing it from the perspective of using the Crystal controllers right here, which are what you'll see in the Pimax Crystal, Crystal Light, and Crystal Super I have right now. Okay then, let's start with the assembly and ergonomics. The initial setup process for this is a little bit involved, but it's nothing too crazy. Once you're done though, messing around with this is quite easy because it has a few points that you can adjust very quickly. Like you have the buttstock at the back here. And it is quite noisy when you do that. And then you adjust this flap to loosen the main hand grip and adjust it however you like. Then you have the point at the back here, which does the exact same thing. And then the front cup here can be rotated and tilted in a variety of ways based on whatever you're wielding to get the best fit. It can also be locked in perfect place though, just by tightening this. Now this last one here, I think this is a genius move I wish more companies would use. That extra freedom with your offhand opens up a hell of a lot of options for your grip, and it is also the sole reason why this even works with the Crystal controllers here. Case in point, this is me and Pavlov holding the gun with one hand. You can see that, well, the gun angle is all off, and if the offhand could not be rotated, aiming would be impossible here. But because of the adjustable offhand grip, when I grip it with both hands and the gun is more controlled by the offhand's position, it lines up fantastically and I can aim without much issue at all. Now then, the stock itself is rather sizable versus some of the other options you may see on the market, which I think is both a pro and con. The buttstock at the back here, it's really nice. Probably my favorite default shoulder stock that I've used so far. It being so big makes it rest great against my body for a very steady fit when I'm aiming. But this can also make kind of a bit of a problem with trying to pick the stock back up from completely letting it go. Say that I need to really quickly drop my gun or do something with both hands, like throw a grenade. Well, if you completely let go of the stock, it likes to flip itself upside down with how the weight balance is. This makes trying to quickly recover and aim with it a really bad time if in a pitched firefight where every second matters. I spent a while messing around with the sling here that you can get for an extra $10, but I just could not get it to do anything but that if I completely let go. But thanks to its size, I kind of found a workaround. By wearing the sling rather loose and over the shoulder, when I let go of the gun, it tends to tilt downward before flipping up. If I sort of brace my inner arm against the side, the gun won't actually flip over, so I'm sort of able to very quickly take any action I need and get my controllers in place in an easy manner without having to fumble around for the right spot. Quickly swapping weapons or using a grenade, it's fine, and the stock is big enough I don't feel restricted by any of my arm's movements when doing this. And because of the open design on the cups here, it's very easy to slot in and out if you need to do some menu navigation on the offhand or the main hand. And despite its size, it's also not as heavy as you might think. I wouldn't exactly carry it around with me all the time in a game where I might regularly not use my rifle, like say Saints and Sinners, with how you're not constantly shooting and more kind of creeping around. But even in immersive single-player story experiences that regularly stop the action, like Medal of Honor, I don't find it obstructive to use for long periods. However, one con with the Crystal controllers and this is that because you are so reliant on your offhand to actually grip the gun and stabilize it when it aims, trying to use manual gun stock adjustment in some games, like Contractors, it doesn't really work out well, and you can't line up the gun like you normally would aim. However, somewhat interestingly, using stuff like virtual stock actually had most gun sights line up shockingly well, especially in Pavlov, where virtual stock plus this made a pretty great and steady combo. No other gun stock I've used with crystal has ever worked out well there. Every single one I had would always be kind of off to hold with virtual stock and have to hold it at an uncomfortable angle. I know you generally wouldn't want to use it when you have a physical stock, but I just thought a neat little thing to mention and can sometimes help control a little bit jitter that the crystal tracking has. On the flip side, though, this adjustable offhand grip is quite nice for helping line up the sights in games which don't have stock calibration, like, again, pretty much any single-player game. And the open design means no magnets you gotta keep on your controllers, which can be a little annoying with some other stocks. But this isn't the headlining feature and why the stock costs almost $200. If you're looking at this, you're here for the haptics. Unlike, say, ProTube's Force Tube, this stock has universal compatibility because it doesn't use software to control anything, and the trigger, alongside adjustments, are handled all on the main hand grip right here. You activate the haptics by pulling on the physical trigger here, which presses the controller trigger so that you shoot in the game. This has 3 modes that you switch between with the press of a button here, which is pretty seamless to do mid-game. Red, what's on right now, is full auto. Yellow is burst fire. Blue is for semi-automatic, 1 trigger press per kick. And these buttons also control further functions if you press and hold them like this, where you can see this is kind of flashing. While holding the button, if you adjust the dial here, you also adjust the functions based on which one you hold. Once again, red is how rapid the feedback is. This is particularly stand out in full auto mode. Yellow controls the actual force put into the feedback, while blue is the shot delay between the trigger press and the haptics happening. This last one can be useful if you are on wireless with that extra latency and you need to sync up your gameplay to your haptics. But on a wired DP headset, like the Super here, always keep this last one low. There is one gripe that I have about this system, though, despite how great I think it is in concept. When you power off the stock and you turn it back on, wherever the knob is seems to apply to all 3 functions, which is kind of annoying if you're somebody who really wants to dial in and fine-tune your guns, because you have to do it each boot, and adjusting these mid-match isn't quite as seamless as merely changing the modes. This said, I generally leave it around the midway point, which is the default, and I find it generally works fine without needing further adjustments for the most part. So if you want less friction and just kind of set it, forget it with the setup, just put it in the middle and you're probably good to go. As for the feedback itself, it's concentrated in the big stock at the back here. It can actually feel decently powerful even on the midway settings. You heard how loud it was on this microphone just a minute ago. Let's see, and that was with noise suppression on. This is with noise suppression off in full auto mode. It has quite the kick to it. However, while in the middle of actual combat with lots of things going on or others talking, especially if you apply just a little noise suppression, then it's not that big of a deal, honestly. Maybe something to keep in mind, though, especially if you are somebody who likes to record things. Now, full auto mode is easily where the stock is at its best and worst. Given the constant feedback and kick from the full auto guns, holding down the trigger really gives that sensation of gun recoil in your body and adds so much to the experience in a way that feels incredibly immersive. I actually tried some of my other stocks I have on hand, like the Armory R1, the Sunlocky, and the ProTube. After using this for a few hours and shooting guns, even with Haptics gear to make up for the lack of feedback, it just didn't feel the same as with the Enforcer, especially when I combined this with Haptics gear. But damn, does it have a real kick to it. Look at this clip of me just holding the trigger on the stock to trigger the haptics, bracing against my body. The gun is empty. Nothing is shooting. You can see how much it is visibly vibrating my weapon and causing some jitter. This isn't even on the max setting either. It's only halfway. In practice, this doesn't really affect your aim as badly as it might look like in the recording, but it is still enough I did sometimes have to correct my aiming a little bit. If I was going to do some competitive multiplayer sweating, I'd probably turn down the feedback a little on the intensity for full auto to help control that extra little jitter a bit, but that's the beauty of the adjustable knob here. In single player experiences, I can go for all the immersive feedback to pull me into the game. Generally though, the full auto mode is great and won't hurt much. This is probably the mode I would show off here were I to demo it to another. Burst fire mode is still pretty great. You get a good amount of recoil and immersive feedback, but is not quite as overwhelming for your aim as full auto can sometimes be. Even on higher settings, it doesn't feel like it hits your aim. Great stuff. The semi-auto mode, though, while I still like having the feedback, I think it is the weakest of the three. You get one real kick per trigger press that you do feel, but unless you dial up the feedback intensity to the max, which gets a little too powerful on full auto then, it never really feels that strong, and the infrequency of it means, at least for me personally, I don't really get as strongly immersed when using that mode. Especially because most semi-auto guns you're going to be using tend to be kind of the more powerful kind, and so you expect quite the strong kick to them. But with this, it's kind of there and gone as soon as it happens. Whereas with the full auto and burst, that sense of numerous small little kicks from each round, sometimes incredibly quickly, it's simulated fantastically and I love it. This mode I'd consider only alright versus the pretty great of the other two. Still nice to have though, but I do think if you are primarily using single shot weapons with this, you're kind of missing out compared to the other two modes. And I found myself gravitating more towards full auto or burst fire weapons just to take advantage of that haptic feeling. Alrighty then. Let's have a quick conclusions and value proposition here. The Enforcer Revolt comes in at about $200 with the ability to add the sling, which I have right now, and do recommend if you pick this up for $10. That may sound like a lot because, well, it is. But considering what you get and the cost of most high-quality gun stocks is in the at least $80 range, like the Olin VR, the Sunlocky Lite, but you generally get into the low to mid 100 range for the ones with more comparable features and really good ones, sans haptics, like say the Sunlocky Elite, the Armory R1, and the Pro Tube. Considering this adds haptics, I don't think it is actually too badly priced, even if it is still 100% an upper-end enthusiast product that is not going to be for everyone. Now, some of those other options, I got to be fair and say they do have better build quality. Like the Armory R1 I have is all injection molded, whereas this uses some 3D printing for a chunk of it, though not the tubing down here. And then some of those also have wider compatibility, whereas this is Quest and Crystal exclusive pretty much. But again, if you want haptics, there kind of isn't really another option remotely the same price class. Even the cheapest force tube configuration is like double the damn price, and buying it standalone is over $100 more than this whole stock before any taxes or shipping. With all that said, personally, if you are in the market looking at some of those kind of gun stocks and are craving the absolute best immersion while also being on somewhat of a budget, I do think it is worth considering the cost of this if that extra feedback sounds appealing. When compared to the similarly spec'd options on the market, it's kind of like you're paying an extra 100-ish, give or take a little, for the haptic feedback. And I do think they're good enough to command that bit of premium if you are using the supported controllers and are a big enthusiast. I'll freely admit, I actually was really skeptical about if it'd be worth the cost, because I do like my other gun stocks, but at the 100 plus, sometimes it's still been like, do I really like it that much? But having used this for a bit, yeah, I do think it is something I buy for myself as somebody who does play a lot of FPS games. But the massive selling point for me is the complete lack of any software and effective universal compatibility because of how this is done. I don't think I can stress this part enough, as compatibility is what these peripherals live and die by. You will never be at the mercy of dev support potentially turning your expensive gear into a paperweight. Case in point, the Force Tube has a wide variety of supported games on their website, but there are still some recent big releases like, say, Metro Awakening or Alien Rogue Incursion, which aren't supported, and you could argue might get some benefit out of something like this. So you can't use it there even if you do think the Force Tube is worth that extra cost over this. For this, your compatibility is limited only by your own determination to use the stock. And especially just comparing to some of the other ones with the crystal itself, Pro Tube's cups were never quite right for me. The Sunlocky I had to physically cut into the mounts to make it fit, and they added weight to the controllers. Armory R1 is pretty nice and ultra lightweight with total freedom in their offhand, but sliding the controller back into that mid-match can kinda suck for the main hand. So yeah, I like it. If you do get this and you plan on using it with the crystal line like I do, just be aware you may need to spend a little time getting it exactly right, and there's some small quirks to work around. Quest controllers fit perfectly fine though. I will have an affiliate link in the description if you wish to order the stock. Make sure you get the Enforcer Revolt though, not the original. There are some key differences here, namely the original does not have the open cup designs. And there is the video. First time doing a gun stock review here and branching out a little on the channel. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to see what I do next, and let me know any feedback for these kind of reviews. And if not, well, thanks for watching to the end here, and maybe I'll see you again in the recommended sometime. Later.